He expected to have a wife. He expected to be married. He never imagined a dream to be married to anyone else at this point. And when she committed adultery, his heart was broken, and according to the Jewish laws and according to societal pressures, he could no longer marry her. And as far as he was concerned, his life until the Lord moved was over. There was no one else to take her place. His plans to have a family, his plans to have a wife and then be honored in society and among men, to be considered equal with other men with families, to be included in the tribal participation in the tribal events and activities, it now had come to an end, and he had no idea what his future held for him, or what kind of a situation. After all, most marriages were prearranged and arranged rather early. Here Joseph, being in his late teens, maybe as early as 20 years old, as late as 20 years old, now has no prospect for a mate. And the future looks a little bleak for him, because all the other young ladies have already been engaged and betrothed to other men. Therefore, you can appreciate and understand the anger that Joseph must have felt. And by Hebrew law, by Jewish tradition, Joseph had every right to make her life miserable. At that time, if a Hebrew woman committed such an act, she was completely, she could not remarry again. She was prohibited to be married, at least as far as the church was concerned, the synagogue was concerned. The only way that she could be married is through a kind of a legal process, and Joseph giving her a certificate of divorce, and on the certificate was usually stated why the covenant had been broken. Understand this too. A price had already been paid. In those days, women, although they were loved and they were cherished, they were also considered a kind of a possession of the family. So that when the young girls married off, then the husband would pay a price for her, a compensation for the loss of that family is going to have because of the loss of this daughter. So in a sense, that's showing honor to women, that they're worth something valuable to the family, and the husbands pay this price in order to have them. The price was likely already paid or in the process of being paid. Now Joseph, to Mary's family, had to consider, do we pay him back? Or could it even be paid back? Because in some cases, as we see in the Bible, the price is paid with labor or work done for the family. And how do you pay that back? So there's a lot of struggles and difficulties at this point. And Joseph's confused. And he had every right now to give her that certificate of divorce. By the way, that certificate of divorce is a lot like what we would call today, it would be like having a record, a criminal record. And it would follow her the rest of her life. In the future, if Mary had actually committed adultery, when future prospective husbands come up, that certificate of divorce would be brought up. And if it did, it would be like having a criminal record. And some guy would have to decide, do I want to marry a woman with this type of criminal record? Now, I don't know if they call it a criminal record, but I'm trying to use a contemporary Western term in order to describe the kind of shame that she had felt. Other things could have happened, by the way. There are other punishments that could have been enacted upon Mary for what she had done, because adultery was about the worst way you could betray or break a relationship. To run off or to do something else is bad. To betray the marriage, that covenant, by adultery was actually the worst thing that she could do. In fact, it could even be punishable by death, by stoning. So here was Mary in this situation. She told Joseph, and Joseph felt this tremendous amount of confusion and anger and every other emotion. Joseph could have asked for the tribunal, the Jewish courts of the days of the synagogue, to enforce the very worst punishment upon Mary he possibly could have. And if he did, no one would look at him as a scoundrel or accuse him of any evil done. It would have been his righteous act in their minds of something to do. But Joseph was a different kind of guy. He may have seemed normal or ordinary in every observable respect. Joseph was He lived in the Jewish community of Nazareth. He was just an ordinary kind of guy, nothing special, nothing outstanding. He wasn't a leader in his community. He was just a regular kind of guy, except one thing. One thing stood out in Joseph that God took notice of. God said, this is the kind of man I want to raise my son, the Emmanuel, God with us. And so we read this, well, we don't read it yet. I don't have it in my notes to read it yet, but it's coming up. We see in Joseph a moral character, a moral courage that is absolutely outstanding. Let's read it now. It should be in my notes right now. Is it? Oh, verse 19. There it is. I thought it was verse 18, so go ahead.
Matthew 1:19. Because Joseph, her husband, was a righteous man and did not want to expose her to public disgrace, he had in mind to divorce her quietly.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. Joseph was, in the NIV, the Greek word is translated a righteous man, and the King James is translated a just man, a just or a righteous man. And this was the quality about Joseph that was outstanding. You see, most normal men at that time would have given her that certificate of divorce. They would have made a scene. In fact, their honor sort of demanded it. By Joseph wanting to divorce her quietly, in our culture we might respect him for it and say, what a nice thing to do. And yet at the same time, because of such betrayal, we would almost be like, what's the matter with you? You had every right to really, punish her for this. Instead, you just quietly have it done. Where's your honor, man? Why don't you defend your honor? And in the Eastern culture, they had a much different understanding of honor than we do. His honor was violated, and he had to defend it. And everybody expected him to do something about it. But Joseph was of a different kind of character. He had a divine character. And that divine character was a character that was full of grace and full of mercy. And it took a lot of courage for Joseph to be able to do what God would consider the right thing. In those days they had certain laws. And those laws were set up to discourage people from doing acts of unrighteousness and committing evil deeds. But when Jesus Christ came on the scene, he revealed to them the true heart of God. And he should reveal that God wants man to be merciful and gracious to one another, to live by what we know as the golden rule, do unto others what you would have them do unto you. And if you made a mistake, you would want people to be merciful towards you. Therefore, be merciful towards one another, even when they make big mistakes. He preached the gospel of forgiveness. It really wasn't a new gospel. It's the same gospel it's always been. God wants us to be merciful and gracious and forgiving and forbearing and kind to one another, even to our enemies and those who mistreat us and do all sorts of evil against us. Here, Mary did one of the worst things that you could do to a man and left him high and dry, so he thought. But Joseph here had this heart of compassion. He was a righteous man, and you're going to see a little video clip earlier where it says that because of his love, we don't know that it was because of his love that he wanted to divorce her quietly. It doesn't say that in the Bible. But it does say he was a righteous man. And that righteousness, no doubt, came from the Lord. He was a man of God. And he did for Mary, he wanted to do for Mary what God would do for us. Forgive her. Let her off quietly. Give her the divorce papers so that she can get on with her life, so he can be set free as well and get on with his life, and let, as the saying goes, I don't even know what that means, what bygones, whatever a bygone is, be bygones, but you know what I mean. Let it go, get over it, let's move on. And this was a just thing to do. In our society, it would be admired. In their society, Joseph took a huge chance, because a lot of people would be wondering, what's the matter with you, man? How could you let her destroy your honor like that? How can you let her do this to your family name? You just let her go and let her do her thing like that. It could have been considered a betrayal of the family. Joseph's family may not have understood it and wanted him to do more. Teach the woman a lesson. Defend your family honor. But he didn't. He had a heart of God. and he had a heart of moral character and courage that stood out above his own personal needs or the needs of his family.